Wow, that was quick. Good evening, everyone. Welcome, all. This is actually the first event of our 211th commencement, and my first commencement, so super cool. I am thrilled to welcome back to Bowdoin Dorothea Rockburne. So welcome, Dorothea. I'll offer a few words of introduction, and I understand the meaning of most of them, but I will admit there are some that I do not. And when we get there, you'll know them when you see them. But Dorothea's work illustrates beautifully the power of the liberal arts. She brings to bear on her artwork mathematics and astronomy, and is herself the product of a really interesting liberal arts education at Black Mountain College. Some of you may know Black Mountain College, but it was in Asheville, North Carolina. No longer exists, but for a number of years had a very unique liberal arts curriculum and was a very powerful liberal arts college. Art was at the center of the education there. But in addition to studying art, Dorothea was a protege of one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century. And under his tutelage, studied Pythagorean and Euclidean geometry. Here we're getting to that part. Group theory, the study of harmonic intervals, all of which made a profound impact on the work that she would go on to create. It often relates mathematical theories to the movement of the planets and the light that comes from deep space telescopes. And for years, she has immersed herself in the study of topology, which she describes as, quote, a complex geometric study of continuous space. I was speaking this afternoon with the directors of our museum, Frank and Ann Goodyear, and they were pointing out to me that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in this country, there were a group of women artists who were having a profound impact on the development and evolution of American art. And they went largely unrecognized for reasons that I suspect are quite obvious. And in the last few years, that has changed, and they have begun to become more and more recognized for the deep contribution they've made to art, and Dorothea is at the center of that group. Some of you may have seen the exhibition that we had here last year in the museum, A Gift of Knowing the Art of Dorothea Rockburne. 3 of her pieces are hanging in the museum now for the collection that we have, To Count Art, an Intimate Friend, highlights from Bowdoin Collection 1794 to the present. And if you haven't wandered over there to go through that exhibit, I recommend it to you highly. But tonight we are thrilled to be able to hear from the artist herself and to share in some reflections that she has on her life and on her career. So without further ado, I am honored and thrilled to welcome back to Bowdoin Dorothea Rockburne.
Good evening. I can't tell you how much I love Bowdoin.
I'm just going to adjust the mic.
Need to bring it over, right? I can't tell you how much I love Bowdoin as a school. I think it's remarkable, and I'm thrilled to be here. So we have to go back. I don't know what this is doing, but it's not doing the right thing. Oh dear. Something got shifted because I wanted to talk about that painting. Here we are. I wanted to talk a little bit about this painting. I wanted to begin with this painting because I don't own it and I never get to see it. And so I thought this would be a really good opportunity. And I want to tell you that the painting is this shape. And this is an indigo blue wall. And when, why does that keep moving? First of all, the title, State of Grace, comes directly from a conversation that Pascal discussed. But I thought it was describing my life, which is, it's always toppling over, and at the last minute it straightens up. and of course, the gold leaf and the sheerness of the painting. Whoa, this does have a mind of its own. The sheerness of the painting, that's all very Renaissance technique, which relates to I learned to paint Renaissance technique when I was a kid at Ecole de Beaux-Arts, and I'll get into that. This is my studio in New York, which is it's a corner, it's very light, and it's very big, and it's got 14-foot ceilings, so it's a grand place to live and work. And this is my friend, who is very mystic and watches everything all the time. And his name is Mahoney. And I wanted to talk to you about my life, really. I don't want to talk about what I've done, although that comes up. But I want to talk to you more about how I got here and the parts that make it now and made me possible. And part of that is watching things grow and being involved with nature. And the mathematics that I learned from Max Dane is not that abstract in a certain sense. It has to do with nature. This is flowers on my windowsill. This is my mother and father. Now, when I was putting this together with my assistant, I said, whoops, no. There we are. I realized this was probably shot in around 1915, so it's 100 years old. And this was when my father had just returned from the First World War, and my mother was Welsh, actually. And they were very, they had their faults. All parents do, including me. But they were really wonderful parents who taught me, I think in many ways, the best of life, and that I had a responsibility to being born to them, to seek happiness in my own terms. And that's not something parents teach us, especially not back then. And this, of course, is we lived in downtown Montreal for a while, and then we moved near the St. Lawrence for a while. We moved back into Montreal Central after a few years, but this is by part of the St. Lawrence. And this is the three children. My cousin Margaret, I don't know who that strange woman is in the back. I don't recognize her. And my sister and me, I'm the little one, and my brother. Oh. And this is the three children again. And the three children. And I mean, I think it's strange growing up in a family because, at least in an Anglo family, children don't really relate to each other so much. And they didn't then, although we did a lot of things together. Oh, and that's my cousin Margaret, who, she was the daughter of my father's brother, my Uncle Pierre. And she was one of the most beautiful women when she's at this point, she's much younger than she looks in this picture. She's probably about 16 or something like that. But she was very tall, and she had raven black hair, and she was very slender, and one blue eye and one green eye. Now, I am part Algonquin. My father's mother was part Algonquin, and she inherited all of those beautiful, beautiful qualities. And this is Ecole de Beaux-Arts, where I was taken to school there as a 9-year-old by a teacher I had, and I studied there on Saturdays. And I had this tremendous conflict because I wanted to go skiing, and yet I wanted to paint, and I wanted to learn to paint. And painting went out. When I was 13, I was good at skiing. When I was 13, I made this big decision, and my brother had been training the Olympic ski team, and I think they were training me for the Olympics. That's what it seems to me when I think back on it. But I, at 13, announced that I wasn't going to ski anymore. I was only going to paint. And everybody got very depressed about that. But that was the school. And this is kind of what a typical class was. You sat down. Now, I never sit down to work. But you sat down and you drew from the figure and so on. And after I finished at the school, in fact, Beaux-Arts ended, I think, for children probably around 13 or 12 or something like that. And then I went to the Montreal Museum School, and I worked there until 1950. And all the way along, I had incredible teachers. That's why I like Bowden. That's what I pick up. The president just asked me how I got to Black Mountain from Canada, and it's because when I was at Beaux-Arts, 2 teachers told me to go there, and I was like 10 years old or something, and it stuck because they made a lot of sense, especially as time grew on. And this to me is kind of looking back on my own life. This is sort of an amazing picture because I'm 13 years old and I'm doing a mannerist drawing. And mannerism at that time was something that was not taught in schools. Most art historians hated it. And I had teachers who said to me, "Why are you making flat figures? You don't seem to understand the perspective of bodies." And I said, "I do understand it, and I'm trying to make a flat figure." That didn't go over very well, but the head of the school was a man named Arthur Lismer, and he, in the way that people can, he kept track of everybody, and he kept track of me. And when I was trying to get into Black Mountain, I talked to him and said I didn't want to go to McGill, and I didn't want to stay in Montreal, that I wanted to go to Black Mountain College. And he had the director of the Metropolitan Museum write a letter on my behalf so that I could get a visa, because that's the 50s, very hard to get into Canada because of the communist scare at that point. So that's an amazing thing, I think, to have somebody do. It's incredible. And this was Black Mountain College. It was very beautiful, to say the least. And it still exists. This is the dining room. The college doesn't exist, but the dining room still exists, and it's very beautiful. And it was there that I really became educated. In Montreal, I went to a very fine school, and I was educated in the academics very well. So I had a good grounding in philosophy, not much in math, but I could write. And I knew, it was surprising. I knew a lot of literature. They were very, very good in that school. And it was called The Study, and I think it still exists. And so when I came to Black Mountain, now everybody thinks of Black Mountain as an art school. It really wasn't founded that way. It was founded as an experiment in education. One of the reasons I didn't want to go to McGill is that they trained you to be something. And I didn't want to be trained to be something. I wanted to be enlightened on how to be a person, how to achieve the happiness my parents spoke of. And I got that there. I had wonderful teachers, and I studied philosophy and mathematics, as you know, and anthropology, and they had remarkable teachers. The anthropologist who was there, he taught African anthropology. His name was Paul Laser. And when Black Mountain faded away, he went to Harvard or Yale, I don't know which. And it was one of his students that discovered Lucy. So they had really top people at Black Mountain. And all the people had rebelled from being I think Paul had been at the University of Chicago that had a big schism at that point. This was the plan for the college, but only one of those wings was ever made, the one that extends out over the lake. And this is, I was married in 1951, and my daughter was born in 1952. And that's my daughter. She's 63 now, just so you don't have to do the arithmetic. There she is again. And I mean, those of you who are parents know what having a child can be. It can show you things that you can never learn any other way. And Christina's been a great joy in my life. And of course, I studied with John Cage. I studied with Merce Cunningham, and Bob was a student, Rauschenberg was a student, but he was there on GI Bill, and he was quite a bit older than me, but he and Cy Twombly and I became very, very good friends, and they were very smart and very wicked, all of them. And that's Cy Twombly, who's a superb painter, for those of you who don't know his work. I studied with Franz Klein, who's also a very, very good painter. And when I left Black Mountain and I came to New York, with my child, it was hard to get my sea legs and find out how to work again. Plus, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a post-student at that point, and most artists don't bloom incredibly young. They don't. It takes time. There are no Mozarts in art. And since I didn't know what I was doing, and even though my marriage had broken up and I was the sole support of my child, I decided that I would, and I had leftover energy, I decided to look into dance, because I'd always studied dance. I'd studied ballet since I was 4, and then worked with Merce and Catherine Litz at Black Mountain. And so there was, oddly enough, ads in the paper. You could take a class with Balanchine for $10. So, and so I took, and of course he didn't teach them. There's always an old Russian woman named Olga that teaches these classes wherever you go. Montreal, same thing. And I took the classes, but ballet to do for me was not interesting. And I drifted down to Jetson Dance Workshop, which was in the Jetson Church in Greenwich Village. And that was a very, very wonderful experience. All the dancers were rebelling. They were rebelling against Graham technique and ballet and all of that, and they were really thinking, and they were doing radical things. And I never wanted to be a dancer, although I had the body for it, for that kind of dance. I didn't want to choreograph or anything. I just wanted to be part of it. And people like Yvonne Rainer, they were doing, Bob Morris was part of it, Rauschenberg did work there. It was such radical thinking that it taught me how to, and this is a kind of osmosis process. It taught me how to apply the mathematics that I had been studying and doing with great joy and research all the way through the break of my marriage and, earning a living. I still did this at night. And somehow there was a moment I was on the stage performing, and I suddenly saw it all in my mind's eye. And I finished that performance, and I never danced again. But pictures were taken of me, and this was on the big, hip newspaper at that time was the Village Voice, and this was on the cover of the Village Voice, and every jerk in the city called me. And this is Bachner and me and Robert Smithson. Robert Smithson was a great artist, and Mel and I lived together for a few years. And Mel's work, as you know, is in an exhibition right here now. And I've always been interested in the antique. I've studied Egypt since I was 6 years old, and intensely. And I still am studying Egypt. I study Egyptian mathematics, amongst other things. I've been to Egypt, and at this point, I had the opportunity to go to England and go to Stonehenge, and also after this, there are no pictures, but I went to, and all my work is Golden Mean, and so I went to Notre Dame and all the medieval churches, which were all based on the golden section. And this is me in 1980 in Egypt, just, part of the only thing I have in pictures of my interest in those areas. I worked, and I didn't think anybody whatsoever would be interested in what I did, but I had to do it. And I worked alone without any guidance of any sort. However, there was a remarkable, at that time in the 70s, sculptor named Richard Van Buren. And I taught with Richard at the School of Visual Arts. And Richard asked me what I was doing, and I showed him what I was doing. And he promoted women. He really was the opposite of a sexist. He bent over backwards because he knew how hard it was. And it was Richard that helped me to get into Bikert Gallery. And Bikert was the leading avant-garde gallery at that time in New York. They were doing very amazing shows and showing very amazing artists. And anybody who was, doing great work at that time that was abstract and geometric and so on work, if they weren't in the gallery, they showed with the gallery. Bryce Martin showed there. Richard Serra was in group shows. Agnes Martin was in group shows. And where'd you go? Well, it's not really working, but the page on the side is the diary notes. I have kept extensive diary notes as I worked. Not all the time. Sometimes I miss almost years, but I still do it. And when this work was first shown, no juice, I guess. When this work was first shown, work that was shown in galleries there were individual works. There was this and this and this. There were not works that represented, the whole room represented a work. And people misunderstood the plus sign. They thought that it was a cross and this was religious. It's not. It's just that one side adds to the other. Now, why is this doing this? And then, thanks to Richard Van Buren and Klaus Curtis, who was my first dealer and really an extraordinary dealer. They don't make them like that anymore. He was amazing. This was from my first show. And I turned the whole gallery into one artwork. And I have never, because I have some personality limitations, I've never promoted my work, done anything to get it into the public. But things happen by accident, like getting to Black Mountain and Richard Van Buren, and Klaus just loved the show, and he got the Museum of Modern Art interested. So out of my first show, they bought this work. Now, they bought it for $500, of which I got $250, and I've installed it with my assistant and my materials at least 4 times. So it's a get-rich-quick plan, as you can see, but And this was working at Finch College, which was a girls' school but had a remarkable curator, it was a very big thing to be in a show, and I did this work to situate, and while it doesn't show up in this picture, there's a black charcoal line that goes around the whole room. And it's about how, a lot of these titles, they're not mathematical exactly. I mean, that is a math title, but it really, a lot of math, I think, is not so abstract. It's about people's lives. And I was trying to situate myself in my own life, as we all are every day. And I used this form to do it. And this is, it's made from chipboard and paper. And I was to take the experience I had here and turn it into this set, which the modern part out of my second show. And it was shown just recently in a MoMA one-person show that I had in 2013 and part of 2014. And this is, again, this is actually installing a work in Italy in Spoleto, and this is intersection. And while intersection is a part of set theory, it's also where you live in your life. It's about how things go together, parts go together. I took all of the, well, that's not working. Nope. 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 Sorry, I'm not good at machines. No. No, I don't know where I am here. Can you go back to where to situate, please?
To situate or intersection?
To situate, because here to scalar is good. I took all of the materials in scalar, the paper, the chipboard, and the crude oil, and I took the parts to use in a different way. But again, there's I don't like to use the word psychology, and I don't know the right word. I don't want to use the word feeling because it's beyond feeling, but I use that in this work, intersection, and I added plastic to it. And this is intersection. It's a layer of plastic is on the floor, a pool of oil is poured on the floor, the crude oil that was used, and then chipboards are sitting, you can't see it in the photograph, are sitting in the oil. And then another layer of plastic is put on top of it. And as the other layer of plastic, the oil goes, and so there's this coming together, which is pretty dynamic. And there is a roll, that roll of paper that the oil is sitting in, that's the roll that you see the white part. So it's all the same component parts, but it's extending the level, for lack of a better word, feelings that I was experiencing and wanted to put in front of me in a mathematical form. And with my second show, I was on the cover of Art Forum. Mind you, I was shy. I never gave a dinner party. I never gave a cocktail party. I went to openings because I wanted, because I worked in the daytime at jobs. It was the only way I could get to see them. And there I met people, it's true. But the cover of Art Forums, the second time out, it's quite amazing. And I'm talking to a museum about doing this work, redoing this work as a permanent installation somewhere. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I hope it will. Again, this is paper. It's a roll of watercolor paper. It has cup grease on it, And this is only one half of this work, which is called Domain of the Variable. Now that's what I mean about mathematics. Isn't that where we all live, in the domain of the variable? I mean, we have these mathematical titles, but if you think about them, even set theory and group theory, we are all having, I think before the Industrial Revolution, people didn't think in groups. And we are all having all the time to understand groups, and now even more so because we're dealing with the internet. And so, I just think the whole concepts that mathematicians use even today are very interested and very human-based. And then shortly after this, by this time, I'm getting a lot of press. And one of the curators from the Museum of Modern Art, who was a really remarkably smart, beautiful woman. Her name was Jennifer Licht. She was going to curate a show there called 8 Contemporary Artists. This is my second time into MoMA. And she asked me to be one of the contemporary artists, and I was kind of floored. And I thought, well, I want to take painting one more step than I've been able to take it. I want to take it off the stretcher. I want to just talk about canvas itself and the honesty of that and put it into a form of the golden section. And I want to use topologies, I want to fold it. And so I made, I think it was 10 golden section paintings. And I got the idea for it. I went to Greece in the summer of '71, I think. And I was lying on a beach, and I had been in Italy, and I was looking at all the robes in Italian painting, Renaissance painting, and it's all folded, And I thought, I want to do this in my way, in a contemporary way. And I want to make it have the classic proportions of the golden mean, and yet I want to make all the rules and break all the rules. And this is a few of these paintings. And it doesn't show up, but this is one side of the linnet. The linen was spread open on the wall. One side was painted with gesso. The other side was painted with a dark varnish. And then it was cut according to those first predestined configurations. Nothing is ever cut through and applied to make a shape. It's all a result of topology. And as I said, I was getting a lot of publicity, and Annie Leibovitz asked to make my photograph, and she did some beautiful photographs. And now that I'm 83, at the time I was horrified. You know how it is when somebody takes your picture and you look at it for the first time right after you think, oh God, do I look like that? And that was definitely how I felt. But now I think, whoa, not bad. And this is Via Salmons, who is, I don't know if you know her work, but she's a really great artist. She's fabulous. She also remade all the rules and broke all the rules. And Elizabeth Murray, who was a very great artist and died young of brain cancer. Unfortunately, she must have died about 10 or 12 years ago now, but she was a very exciting young artist. And she had, she'd been given the death sentence because it was stage 4. And as she was undergoing chemo and in the process of dying, she had a retrospective curated by Rob Storr at the Museum of Modern Art, which was a very wonderful show. Now, we're all aware of the prejudice against women. So, and Rob has always championed women, but for Elizabeth to get that show tells you how very good her work was and is. And this is me working in my back studio. I have no idea what I was working on, but something. And this, again, is probably about 15 years ago. And Jenny Lick I was already folding things, and I'd done a lot of work on paper coloring, which makes it south. And I was folding the canvases, and Jenny found this book by an Indian mathematician on folding. And she bought it. It's an old book, and she bought it, and she gave it to me, and I became fascinated by this work of Rhea. Can't read it because it's the last curve that was ever invented, including since computers. And this is a woman. There have been a lot of women mathematicians who have not been recorded properly throughout the history of mathematics. And she did get acknowledged because she was from a very wealthy family in Bologna, and she was one of 13 children. I came across this curve, and I thought, I want to understand this. I want to understand what it takes to invent a curve. Now, I knew that I could never invent a curve. I mean, it just wasn't in the cards. I'm not a mathematician. But I studied this and a lot of other math seriously for 6 months, from June, every Saturday, with a friend who was a physicist, from June and from January until June, at the end of which time, and all of that time I did homework every night. I completely gave up my social life. I just did that. And at the end of that time, I thought, well, now I know how it's done. It's not what I want to do. I thought, I think with my eyes, my brain, my gut, and my hands, and I wanted to do that. And so it's hard to see this work. What this work was, a large sheet of vellum that was stretched on a table. And there was a square drawn on the vellum and a rectangle, the rectangle being a golden section rectangle based on the proportions of the square. In the square, in colored pencil, thick colored pencil, I drew a circle. And in the rectangle, I drew an ellipse. And then, according to the same principles of cutting and folding that I'd used in the golden section paintings, except by now I knew more, and I went a lot further, I made the Arena drawings. Now, the title, of course, comes from Giotto's Arena Chapel, which I also studied most of my life, one way or another. I once spent a week in Padua, going to it every day. Here you can see the vellum and the transparency showing through to each other, and the attempt to really use curves in a different way. And one of the things about the universe, as you probably know, is there are no straight lines. And in a very rudimentary way, I'd studied astronomy at Black Mountain. And of course, one of the people on the board was Einstein. And Einstein, he came there, but not while I was there. I think he died in 48 or something, and I didn't get there until 50. But one of the things and Max Dane was friends of him, he said, he wasn't just a physicist, he was an astronomer. And he said things about space which indicate that. And of course, his whole wanting to kick over the theories of Isaac Newton or give him a run for his money really indicates that he was interested in astronomy. And I was and am, do a lot with astronomy, and I think maybe this was the first serious beginning of curves. And this is Rob Storr in 19, I think I was, well, maybe 88, I don't know, but I did this show called Pascal and Other Paintings and Other Concerns, and that's what the first painting I showed you was. And Rob, who is a brilliant curator, brilliant writer, a very generous and giving man, wrote a beautiful catalog essay, and I thought you might read just a small part of it because it's such a beautiful essay. And this is part of the work. Of course, Pascal talked about doubt, and that really, if you're sure of yourself, you're narrow. And that's certainly my experience with other people. It means their ego is very insecure and they're covering up. And I take doubt as a real method of working in my work. And of course, and this again, I'm sorry that the pointer's not working, because this is a shaped canvas, and it's a layered canvas, two layers, one layer on top of another, and it's mounted on an indigo blue wall. I painted my whole loft indigo blue so that I could key the colors for this work off of indigo blue, and when it was shown, the whole gallery was painted indigo blue. And I have been studying Pascal since the 4th grade, because that's Canadian schooling. And I still read Pascal. And later, when I knew more, I was able to study his amazing mathematics. But his life, he's such a rebel. I mean, I don't know if you know about him, that during the time of Louis XIV, he was rebelling against the church. He had a printing press, and he printed scandalous reports against the government and moved the press every day. Now that's rebellion. And the top canvas, these are two separate canvases. The top canvas is much shallower. It's probably about 2 inches, whereas the bottom canvas is 4 inches. So the one thing is sitting on the other. And again, this is all Renaissance kind of painting over silver leaf. Oh, came on for a minute there. This is blue painted over silver leaf. Not easy to do because you get one shot at it, and if you go back over it, it tears the silver leaf and you have to start from scratch. And right now, one of the many bugaboos in my life is saving the Sony murals. I did 2 murals in 1993 that are 30 by 30, and I love my own work, or I wouldn't do it. And I think these murals, and other people share my opinion, I think these murals are remarkable. They are just a remarkable work of art. And the building, Sony sold the building, and a real estate group bought it, and for 2.5 years, they wouldn't answer my pleads, my letters, packages, nothing. No matter what I did, lawyers' letters, nothing. So I put a big article in the real estate section of the New York Post. And I heard from them within 24 hours. And I thought the murals had been saved because they said, because before that they were going to be painted over. And I thought they'd been saved because they said they'd be saved, but the real estate market changed, and all of those guys are real barracudas. And the real estate market for that part of town changed. They flipped the building over, and now a Saudi group owns it, who's a very big organization. And I've made contact through somebody with them, but I am intent on more about this. I mean, if they won't respect it, and I think they may actually, because I've already made a fuss. I've already gotten it into the Wall Street Journal, into the New York Times. I've done a lot of groundwork, but I can go further. And while I would never do this to promote myself, I will do it to save this work because it is really worth it. And what it does is it traces the electromagnetic field in the northern, and there's just two different walls facing each other. It traces the electromagnetic field in the northern and southern sky, and it traces the actual electromagnetic field as it exists, as much as we know, over that particular building. That's the way it is. I worked with a mathematician on it, and it's a pretty accurate description, but beside the subject matter, which in a way is still personal, it is a very beautiful work and it needs to be preserved. And a wonderful drawing person whose name is Kate Gans did an exhibition at Dominique Levy Gallery recently based on Bernice Rose's Drawing Now show, which was at MoMA in '73 and was a spectacular show. She did a show called Drawing Then, and she asked me for work from the '60s. Well, during most of the '60s, I didn't start to work again until I think around '65. I said, I don't think I have anything, because that's when I was dancing. I have work from the '50s, but not so much from the '60s. So she said, I know you look at drawers. So I looked in drawers. I found all this work I'd done that is now up in my studio that I mean, of course, I didn't forget about it, but I hadn't thought about it. And it was a great discovery to find all this work again. And this is one of the works that was shown here in my show. And I was, in doing this work, I was interested in I had learned that when stars explode, there is a mathematical organization to that explosion, as I suppose there is to every explosion, and you would know that, of course. But I went about exploring that work, and the work is not very big in size, as you can see. And this is me standing in front of the work that's up there now, called three-point manifold, which is a wonderful concept in physics. And I did a one-person retrospective at the Parish Museum in 2011, and this is a shot of the retrospective. And there's Scalar at the far end, borrowed from MoMA. And I'm part of an organization called FAPE, and when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, I gave her a part of a work that had to do with something I was doing for FAPE at the time. FAPE is something about preservation for art in embassies, and I was commissioned by them to do a work honoring Colin Powell, and I chose to do the nighttime sky over Jamaica on the night he was born. He was actually born in the Bronx, but his family is Jamaican. And of course it comes via Renaissance painting. I mean, the constellations are gold leaf and so on. And so that's a model of it. And again, this is the model, and this is actually the installation of putting the work up in the American Embassy in Jamaica, where it is now installed. And this is, it's 41 feet high by 16 feet wide on canvas. So it's very big, and it was very difficult to find walls high enough to do it. It was first begun at the Queen's Museum, where they were going to tear down a wall eventually, so I got to work there in the summer. And then it got postponed for a while, and we found another space in Queens that was an ice house, and they made that possible for me to work there. And then it was finished, and then it got shipped with great difficulty to Jamaica and installed. And it's hard to photograph, as you can imagine, but this is kind of it. And since Colin Powell is a tourist, there's his sign is in it. And that's the sun. And you can see the lines going through the head of the ram are gold leaf. And the colors vibrate when you're in, and something remarkable also happens, and I didn't know whether it would happen or not, and that is I was trying to deal with a space that would give you perspective without using perspectival space. I did some other inventions in it. So when you stand close to it, you feel that the sky is over your head. And that is, to me, quite an accomplishment, because I'd always wanted to do that. And it was great that Fabe gave me such an opportunity to do this work. And I did, as I said, not a retrospective, but a one-person show at MoMA in 2013. Now, as I've said, they have always championed my work. And the curator thought it would be a good idea to do a show of all the work they own, to show that, in fact, they own a lot of my work. And they have championed women. They can't champion all the women they'd like to, I'm sure, and certainly not enough. But they certainly have been my champion. And this is all work that they own. This is a carbon paper installation. And this show was, as I said, it opened up in September of 2011. And they have a policy of not really promoting shows that are not on the 6th floor. They don't do catalogs for them, and they don't do publicity for them. And so it was so interesting. It was kind of like my career in a way. The first 3 weeks, there was nobody in the galleries. And I went all the time because these works were illuminated with a lot of light. And this is a drawings gallery, and they didn't have the right electrical fixtures for it, so lights kept burning out. So I'd go and see, and I'd ask the lighting people to come and replace the light bulbs. So I was there a lot. So the first 3 weeks, the odd stranger passing through. And after that, every day, the galleries were full of people. Word of mouth works. No internet, word of mouth. And that's my life up to date, more or less. So that's everything. Now, I know that whenever I've been in an audience and even a friend is talking and somebody says questions and that, I think, I know I have a question somewhere. So I know it's hard to ask questions in the beginning anyway, but I would love to answer questions. Sure.
This is just a painting question about how you came to use crude oil in your work, and where the idea came from, and where you got the stuff.
Well, I lived on Chambers Street, in downtown Manhattan. And the art supply stores were the closest one was 23rd Street. Now, I was going like a bat out of hell in my life. I mean, I got up at I put my daughter in a school that was at 89th Street. I mean, you know, good planning, but it was a great school. And and there were no buses. And I would get up at 6, and I would kind of prepare for the day, and then I would take her from Chambers Street to 89th Street, which is a big job. And somewhere in there I had to, and I also had my own job, and then I left there and I went to work. And then I picked her up at 4 in the afternoon, and I would either take her for a visit or bring her downtown and cook with her. You know, it was our time, do things with her. And I had no time and no money whatsoever. And the only place I found that I could buy things, I got very good drawing paper, but my art materials came from a hardware store. And the crude oil I used came from there. People used it for furniture polish. You can't buy it anymore because they also use it in bombs now. But, you know, and that's where it came from. And I loved what it did. And of course, in the works like Scalar, I'm pretty fastidious about what I do. I use the best of materials, and I'm not foolish. So before I did Scalar, I mean, I don't want to waste my time and have it, you know, fade away or dissolve. Before I did Scalar, I was in touch with the paper conservator at the Museum of Modern Art at that time, and I said, I'm about to do this, and what do you think? And she said, well, there's a very simple test you can do. She said, you can take a piece of paper and put crude oil on it and put it in your oven at 150 degrees overnight. And if you have anything left in the morning, you'll know exactly what will happen. Well, Scalar hasn't changed a bit. Hasn't changed one bit. It's exactly as it was. So, you know, I do tests. I mean, they're unusual materials, even for that time when people were using unusual materials. Anybody else? Hi.
When you've done, like, in the Hard Times show, or the Modern show, and you're remaking a piece, do you find that your experience of the piece changes?
You know, that because I'd like to do domain of the variable again, you know. And I thought, you know, there's a huge gap in time there. It's 1970 or 71 or something like that. And because the sources of my work are not entirely visual, they're mathematically based. That mathematics is as close to me now as it ever was, and I don't think I'll have if I can still get the materials, I don't think I'll have an ounce of problems with it. I think it, you know, because it's very, in many ways, the basis of what I'm doing. Still, you know, it's the foundation bricks. Yeah. In a way, excuse me?
Nope, go ahead. One more question here in the back.
Go ahead.
Dorothea, thank you so much for a beautiful presentation. One of the things you said that I loved was that you think with your eyes, your guts, and your heart. And it made me think a little bit about the relationship between your body and your visual art. And on that note, I wondered if you could elaborate on what dancing meant to you in the 1960s and how that fit into the trajectory of your career with respect to the way in which your visual imagery evolved.
That's a very good question. Thank you. You know, as I say, I was trained not only as an athlete, a skier, a swimmer. When I was a kid, I was not every day because it takes a long time, but I was swimming 5 miles a day, for instance. And in my class, you came out of the womb, in my family, you came out of the womb taking classes. And so, you know, popped into ballet at 4 and so on. And so I was physically both strong and flexible, which is unusual in dancers. You usually get one or the other. And learning to move with my body and not do ballet, but learning to move as one did at Jetson was learning to think with my body, which you do automatically anyway, but this put an emphasis and a clarity to it. And so, you know, when it came to folding paper, I thought, if I was a sheet of paper, what would I do? You know, I mean, it's not as simplistic as that, but it's pretty, you know, I mean, I also know that paper has a top, a bottom, and a depth. So it's not two-dimensional. All paper is three-dimensional, and I wanted to take into account the front, the back, and that dimension. So that's a, you know, but that's an art way of thinking too, but it's also simple topological things that you do in the beginning. But, you know, as I've said in print and in person, the profound art experience of my life was working with Max Dane, who had been part of the Frankfurt group in the 20s, and they were a group. Their mathematics is a kind of the foundations of various aspects of our life today. They were incredible, and they were funny. They had a great sense of humor, and they formed something called the Bourbaki, which was a fake mathematician, and they had him publish papers, and it's a remarkable, wonderful story that I don't have time to go into, but his understanding of nature, his zest for life, his love of mathematics and people. It wasn't just me that he did this to. Truman McHenry, who is not too far from here and was in my class, he invited Truman to dinner all the time. It wasn't just me, it turns out. We were never there together. But he made me understand that the root of our existence, of everything, is mathematics. And I'm sure, you know, you've seen the Alan Turing movie about the Enigma, and there's a great math movie out right now about the Indian mathematician Ramanujan, and it's called The Man Who Knew Infinity. And all the things that Ramanujan did are the sources of many things that are happening to us and for us, is certainly because he also tied into Max's work because he working with the kinds of mathematics he did and applying it later on as a physicist did to particle theory. It's the source of the understanding, and I'm talking a broad sweep, so forgive me, but I'm accurate. It's the source of the understanding that we have now, that if you use polio, if you put polio vaccillae into people with brain cancer, it could cure it. But that all comes from Ramanujan's mathematics. As I say, I'm making broad sweeps. Well, I can't go into it, but you know, it's mathematics, not what you learned in high school. I mean, I missed all that. That was good. I went from nothing, you know, from simple algebra to higher mathematics, and everybody I know who's and Jen Tabak says people are poisoned by their math teachers in high school. I never had that. And you say mathematics to most artists, and they go, you know, we can't do that, and so on. But it's not true if they knew. And it's as simple as and as complex as painting itself. Thank you.
Stay here with me for 1 second.
Okay.
Let me just get to the microphone. Thank you, Dorothea. That was marvelous. One of the things that strikes me is for my colleagues on the faculty here, and I'm thinking of Jen and Tom and others, but the influence the unintended and intended influence that our teachers have on us is amazing. And for those of my colleagues that practice this craft and do it so well every day, it is a remarkable thing to keep in mind, just how important it is, what it is that goes on here in ways that we don't even imagine today, but will have enormous impact in years to come. So it's a remarkable thing. Thank you. We are so thrilled that you are an honorand and here with us again and back at Bowdoin. Let me also remind our guests that another one of our honorands, Frank Shorter, will be here in Kresge tomorrow at 2:30 to also give another talk. And Dorothea, let me again thank you for gracing us with your presence and sharing your life with us. It's remarkable.
Okay, you have,